Let's begin with a few minutes of Shamatha practice, cultivating relaxation, stability, and vividness. If you find your mind distracted, bring it back gently to your meditation object. Now with a calm, present mind, let's reflect about karma. Karma is intentional action. Such actions leave imprints on our mind stream that influence what we will experience in the future. So bring to mind events of your own life as we reflect on the 4 general aspects of karma. The first one is that karma is definite. Happiness always comes from constructive actions. Remember moments of your life when you did such constructive actions. And how did that make you feel? How did the others reacted? What were the consequences of those actions? In the same way, pain comes from destructive actions. Therefore, it's to our advantage to create virtuous actions and abandon negative, destructive actions. The next aspect is that karma is expandable. A small cause can lead to a large result. Remember an example from your life. When you did a small action, such as a little lie that you thought it wouldn't have consequences, but then it grew to a bigger situation with conflicts or problems. Thus, we should take care to abandon even the smallest negativities and to do even small constructive actions. A third characteristic is that if the cause hasn't been created, the result won't be experienced. So if we don't act destructively, we will not experience hardships and obstacles. In the same way, if we don't create the cause for realizations of the path, we will not gain them. The fourth characteristic of karma is that karmic imprints do not get lost. We will experience the results. However, negative imprints can be purified by the four opponent powers. In the same way, positive imprints can be impaired by getting angry or generating wrong views. So determine to observe your motivations and actions so you create the causes of happiness and avoid creating the causes of suffering. Complete action is one that has a preparation and actual action that we create with our body, speech, or mind, and a completion. And each one of our actions brings results or consequences. By contemplating specific actions and their effects, we can understand the causes of our present experiences and the future results of our present actions. So determine yourself to take responsibility for your own happiness by avoiding destructive actions, by purifying those already done, and by acting constructively. Now, with that determination to be constantly mindful of our actions, of body, speech, and mind, and their motivations, with the wish to do more constructive actions that can benefit us and others, and abandon destructive actions. Just rest, dissolve all the thoughts, analysis, memories, and rest in the present. Let's finish dedicating the merit of this practice so we can continue gaining insight and understanding of how our actions create consequences. We can be mindful of these actions and we can perform ones that help others, that benefit others, that alleviate our suffering and the suffering of others, and that bring happiness into the world. As we see in this meditation, in this topic, we reflected on several factors or aspects of karma, this law of cause and effect that we sometimes don't know is there. We know there is cause and effect for the material, physical realm. We see it. If we drop something, there's a consequence that it will fall, right? But when we do actions, sometimes we think that they won't have consequences, or that the consequences would be not corresponding to the cause. But here we're told that the result is always similar to the cause. So we can think in terms of seeds. These mental imprints are like seeds. If we plant a seed of an apple, we're going to get an apple tree. We cannot get an orange tree from a seed of an apple. And similarly, when we plant a seed in our mind stream of a negative action that was done with a selfish motivation or with a wish to harm others, the result is going to be suffering and pain. So how do we know this? Because many contemplatives, since the time of the Buddha, have analyzed this law of cause and effect, and see how it is connected. But we can also see it, right? Now, it's very complex because sometimes you plant a seed on one day, but the result doesn't happen immediately. But let's say you go out and start insulting people and treating them very bad and harming others. There's going to be a consequence. People are going to react and they're going to do something to you, or maybe they're going to put you in jail. There's going to be a consequence. Now, it's very complex because when we plant a seed, the seed can be there in our mind stream for a long time without ripening. Eventually, it will ripe. As we see here, one of the characteristics of karma is that it doesn't go away if you don't do anything. There's things you can do. You can burn the seed with some purification practices, or you can diminish the effect of the consequence.
Is it just action or even thought?
It's action that we do with our body, with our speech, and with our mind. So even thought is creating karma, is creating consequences. The most important thing there is the motivation, right? But let's say the seed is there, is planted, but the conditions, the sun, the water, and the environment, all the conditions haven't come together. So let's say you have the seed and you put it on a shelf. Unless you plant it and put the water and the soil and all of that, it will take a long time for it to ripen. But maybe in the shelf eventually, because of the conditions of the environment, it will also ripen. But the thing is that you might have planted a seed in the past, but right now you're experiencing the consequences of other seeds that you planted before. And this seed hasn't met all the conditions for ripening. But when those conditions arise in your experience, that seed is going to manifest. And so sometimes you have an experience of like someone attacking you or being aggressive or angry with you without you clearly knowing why, or you start experiencing some problem or difficulty, or suddenly some gift, something you want suddenly comes to you, but you don't see the causal correlation. You don't think you did anything to deserve it. Yet we did it. We just don't remember when, but the conditions are there. And so this seed that is already been there for some time, it's just ripening. So that's why we get confused when we see people in the world that start doing very negative actions, and then they have lots of money and they have a lot of interesting, pleasurable experiences, and we say, why that person that is doing so much bad in the world, so much harm, has all these positive conditions in their life? But that's because they planted the seeds for that temporary happiness in the past. But these actions they are doing in the present will have a consequence, right? Now, there's sometimes where the karma is arising immediately because the conditions are there. So let's say you fight with someone. Maybe the person will fight you back in the moment, right? That would be the consequence because the conditions are there. But sometimes it can take months or years or even lifetimes, according to the Buddha and many other contemplatives. They say that we can experience in this life as an action, the result of an action that we planted in previous lives, or that the seed we're planting now we might experience in future lives. So that kind of complicates things, and it's difficult to follow through all that network of interrelated causes and effects and conditions giving rise to other conditions, right? But we have some guidelines about what we can do and what we better don't do if we don't want to experience that suffering, right? But in Buddhism, there's no talk about you receiving an external punishment for an action, for a negative action, or a reward for a positive action, like somebody's checking on you and is gonna check if you did the homework or not. It's more like each one of us is responsible. We have the knowledge, and then it's up to you. You want to keep doing those actions? It's okay, it's up to you. If you're willing to take responsibility and experience the result of your actions, right? You want to take responsibility of your own happiness? That's up to you too. So sometimes we have this idea, well, I've heard some people, some groups of people believing that we're just evolving. We're spiritual beings that we're evolving until we're going to become enlightened or call it the name you want it, but we don't have to do anything. We just have to wait, and we can do any actions we want, and we eventually will get there because we're in a constant process of evolution. But from the Buddhist perspective, that's not like that. We've been in cyclic existence again and again, and we won't get out unless we cultivate the causes and we stop creating the causes of suffering. So that makes a lot of sense if you analyze it. And these points are very important in order to understand karma. That is definite. So you create a complete action when you have the motivation, the intention to do something, then you do the action, and then you reinforce that action. What word we used here? We used the completion of that action, right? So for example, you say, I'm going to steal that car. Yeah, that's the idea, right? There's the motivation might be negative, like I want to get the car and I don't care about the other person I'm stealing from, just want it for my benefit. Or the motivation might be mixed, like I'm gonna sell that car and give that money to charity, to the poor. So it's kind of a mixed motivation. You want to help, but you also are harming the owner of the car, right? Or it can be positive, but if you're not a realized person, most probably, even if you think it's positive, it won't be positive, right? It's not like you just can deceive yourself thinking, I'm doing it with a good motivation. I'm stealing from you with a good motivation. Because that person, the owner of the car, is not going to like it, whether your motivation is good or not. So you have the idea, you have the motivation, and then you go and steal the car. So you perform the action. You completed the action. And then you say, I'm glad I stole that car. So you kind of reinforce the action. You completed the action, right? But let's say after you steal it, you start feeling some regret and say, I shouldn't have stolen that car. Maybe I'm going to return it. So the action is not fully complete. Not the full action of stealing, because you regret and because you return the car. So the action of stealing is not completed, yet you did perform an action, and it will have a consequence. But it will be much less than if you hadn't regret and returned the car, you see? So each action is, it has different magnitude of result, but it's always definite. It's always gonna have a result. Now, you can have an action where you say, in the same way, it can be positive. You can say, I'm gonna give my son or my daughter a car. So it's a good motivation, right? It's a generous motivation. You want to give the car. And then you give her or him the car, and you say, I'm glad I gave the car. So you completed the action of generosity. But maybe you say, I'm not very happy of having given the car. Or I give you the car, but only if you do this. And if you don't do my wishes, I'm going to take the car from you. So that's manipulation. So it's not a very constructive action. Or you can think, I'm going to give my child a car. But you just think it. You don't do it. So you didn't complete the action, but the thought also has consequences. It was a generous thought, but it's not the full action of generosity, right? And if you give something with expecting something in return, then it's also not the full action of generosity. So in this way, we can see that it has this completion cycle. And a little action can become big. That's why we were saying here too, that it's expandable. So it's like a snowball. So you for example, put a seed of apple. Well, the tree is gonna grow big and it's gonna give many apples, right? In the same way, when you, for example, say a little lie because you think it's okay and it's not gonna harm anybody, but then that lie becomes a big gossip and it becomes a thing that harms others very badly or can take them to feel very depressed because you said that lie about that person, for example, right? So a little thing can keep growing unless you stop it. And there are ways to stop, and that's what we mean by the four opponent powers. We're gonna reflect a little bit about that tomorrow, but there you can apply opposing forces to reduce the impact or to purify that action, and that's good news, right? Now, the other point is that karmic imprint do not get lost. So you die, you take your actions with you, the results of your actions. And that's important to consider. Now, the results of karma have a maturation result. And this is that after this life, the type of body and mind that we will develop or have, it will be corresponding to that karma. So if we created only negative karma, we probably gonna have an unfortunate rebirth. And the manifestation of the realm we're gonna be and the beings is gonna be an environment of suffering and the mental afflictions we must cultivate. So we familiarize ourselves putting imprints of hatred. We're going to be surrounded by hate. And in the same way, if we do constructive actions, we can have happy rebirths, happy experiences. And also the effect on the environment. Sometimes we see people that are in places where there is no food or no water, or there's a lot of pollution in the environment, or there is difficult to live in that place, and they are born there or they have for a certain reason to be there. Or sometimes even in the same place, like you can be in this beautiful place and two persons can be experiencing a completely different experience. One person can see, wow, how beautiful this landscape we have, the Himalayas, the mountains here, feel so inspired, and the environment has these beautiful sounds of birds and nature, and it smells like flowers. And the person sitting next to this person can be experiencing is a terrible environment. It's so noisy, the weather is bad, it's so damp, I feel bad with this environment. It's perceiving it in a different way. It's arising from our karma, the way we experience every moment, and each one of us is experiencing a slightly different reality. So to give you an example, according to the teachings, if you cultivate divisive, disharmonious speech, this brings as a result a rebirth in an inhospitable environment with severe storms. So there's a connection between our actions and the type of body, lifestyle, and even the environment that will manifest around us. So the there's another saying that the cause for being wealthy is not working really hard. It's because you were generous in the past. And the result of being stingy is that you're gonna experience poverty. In the same way with other things, right? For example, the result of having a beautiful body is a result of being patient. And the result of being angry is having an ugly body that people perceive as disagreeable. So every little thing we're experiencing right now comes from an intricate collection of causes that we've created in the past. That's why each one of us is having a different experience, a different lifestyle, a different things. There are similarities, but they're different, right? So if we understand how karma works, we can start cultivating the causes we want to cultivate. Yeah.
It sounds like poor people might deserve their life, or miserable and poor people deserve it in a way, if you believe the karma.
That's always difficult to think about, and to think that people that are experiencing great suffering, they cultivated the causes in the past. And according to this teaching, yes, they cultivated the causes, but that doesn't give us the right to tell them, it's your karma, or you did wrong. We all have cultivated terrible causes, but just because they haven't ripened for us doesn't mean they won't ripen soon. So we should always cultivate compassion and help whoever we can to purify that karma and help them in the way we can, because we are all interdependent. So even though they created causes, we can be a cooperative condition for their seeds, their positive seeds, to ripen and to balance that suffering they're experiencing, right? So you can practice generosity with them, you can offer service, time, medicine, everything you can to those beings, instead of telling them, well, it's your karma, and my karma is to have all these positive experience, because we all created so much mixed karma that you don't know, the next moment you can be experiencing something difficult. Now, it's interesting because sometimes we interpret an experience of others from our perspective, right? And we say, oh, poor people, they are experiencing so much suffering, because we imagine ourselves in that situation and we wouldn't be able to bear it. But sometimes poor people are happier and have more well-being and more equanimity than rich people, right? So it's hard to understand sometimes. But there's people that have work with their minds, and even if they have an illness or they lose their job or a loved one, they have the equanimity to navigate that experience with a peaceful mind. And there might be others that have too much of everything, but don't have that balance to navigate that difficult experience. So each one of us is it's not only experiencing our own karma, but also we don't know about the others. There's a story about a man that lived in a little village, and his son, well, one of his horses escaped and disappeared. And so the people in the village said, "Oh, what a bad karma. Your horse left and you have one horse less, right?" And he said, "Bad karma, good karma, who knows, right? I should be grateful for everything." And then his son finds the horse and bring it back. And everybody tells him, "What a good karma, your son found the horse." And he said, "Good karma, bad karma, who knows? I should be grateful for everything." And then the son goes out riding the horse and falls and breaks his leg. And everybody says, "What a bad karma, your son broke the leg. Now he cannot walk for several months." And he said, "Bad karma, good karma, who knows?" And then it comes the war, and they come to recruit young men to send them to the war. But because the son has an injured leg, he's not recruited. So he's the only young man that stays in the village. And everybody says, "What a good karma. Your son didn't have to go to war." You see? So even if we think something is bad karma, it might be good karma if we learn to take a lesson from that experience. There's a book by Gyatro Rinpoche called Transforming Adversity and Felicity into the Path. So we can transform every experience into a learning, and then it becomes good karma. But if we get angry because we are experiencing that negative karma rising, what we consider negative, and we get very upset and perpetuate those actions, then we're kind of sowing the seeds again, and it becomes a cycle, right? So we can transform our experience, and that's why when we do practice and we face obstacles during a retreat or during your meditation, we say those obstacles are purification, because by having this obstacle, it means that a negative action in the past was liberated, so I don't have to deal with it anymore. Now, if you are doing a lot of practice, for example, in the context of a retreat, you're creating a lot of virtuous actions just by deciding to be in retreat, practicing these teachings, and putting thought to reflecting on these things. You are creating a big amount of positive karma, because you are directing your mind to what is meaningful, to what can lead you to complete freedom from karma and complete liberation from suffering. So somehow that creates a lot of positive karma. Yet, when you're doing that, you're creating too much positive karma, there can be this like a purification happening with the shamatha practice, with specific tantric practices like vajrasattva, but basically all the practice is purification. So sometimes you have a very strong seed from your past. For example, experience a very strong illness or something very heavy. But because you're doing a lot of practice, that seed ripens as a flu, like a little flu or a little discomfort during retreat. But it means you purified that seed, but it's still kind of manifested, ripened, like a little weed that just vanished, but not the full effect of that seed. That's why when we do a lot of vajrasattva or any practice, we find some obstacles, but they are not really obstacles, they are purification. So, yeah.
Are you going to practice the method of purification of the things that we did?
Yeah, tomorrow we will do some purification practice. Yes?
Maybe adding to what you said, of turning bad things into the past, something what one of my teachers told me, which really helped me quite a lot, was that he said, when you have something bad happening to you, you can take it as an object for meditation, for example, or just take it and turn it, as long as you find something good about it, because in everything there is nothing which is inherently bad or good. So he told me, if something bad happens to you, take it, look it, try to turn it around and look it from all sides where you can see, until you find something good about it. And this, let's say, teaching he gave me and this practice helped me a lot during the past years when something bad happened to me. So that's why I wanted to share it.
Yeah, and that's a very good instruction, right? Because even in the most difficult situation, we might be able to transform it into something positive, or not transform it, see that it has those positive qualities or aspects that we can perceive if we put the attention there. For example, Viktor Frankl, the father of the logotherapy, he said he was in a concentration camp with the Jews, and he said that they can take everything from you, but not that freedom to choose how you live that experience. So you can be free in the middle of that situation. Or the Tibetans who said, I use that place as my retreat center, and I practice everything I learned. So I use the opportunity to cultivate patience and compassion and everything with this situation, right? And many practitioners in those concentration camps achieved realizations because of their power, of the motivation to use whatever is there in your experience as a practice. Anything else? Yes?
Yes, regarding thoughts. So, as you already said, most of the thoughts are involuntary. So, in a way, they can be understood as results of our conditioning, past karma, and so on. And so now, if the thoughts also generate karma, and most of these thoughts are involuntary, they just appear as a result of past karma. So, where does then this generate karma? In our reaction to these thoughts, or only our voluntary thoughts create karma?
No. When an involuntary thought arises and you don't grasp to it, it's just as you say, it's a result of our conditioning and all these factors, but you just let it dissolve, and it doesn't create karma unless you grasp. Because when we grasp, how do we react? With attachment, with aversion, or with indifference or ignorance, right? So by grasping to it, we give the power to become an action with an effect. We sow a seed. But if we see it arise and pass, as we do in the practice of settling the mind, we are liberating that thought. Is self-liberating. Same with emotion, right? If a strong emotion of anger arises and you're totally present with it, it doesn't have the power to hurt you or to create problems or hurt others. But if you grasp to the anger and you believe it, that might manifest into angry words and into angry actions that can harm others. And then it becomes a strong karma, right? But as long as we be just present with it, not fusing ourselves with that emotion, then it's just anger arising and passing and liberating. It doesn't have the power to harm us. Nothing in our mind, as we do these practices of observing the mind, those thoughts have no power to harm us. Nothing. Because our mind is pure awareness, right? Our true source. So all these thoughts are adventitious are arising and passing, and the problem is when we chase them, and with desire, with craving, with rejection, then is when we start creating karma. That's why being in the present is a practice that is very helpful, because the moment we start chasing our thoughts, we're creating karma. But if you are fully present, moment by moment, and letting them arise and pass, you're being liberated.
So in this sense, then even if we kind of do engage with them, but only like with mindfulness, that we just observe them mindfully, to investigate them in a vipassana style, it's also okay. It's,
Yeah.
As long as we don't grasp it and then kind of let it grow into actions and so on.
Right. Okay. Well, see you tomorrow.